It all revolves around him. He is the supreme point of everything. We explored those feasts. We found out all sorts of amazing things that challenge us in a lot of ways about our own personal life and our life as a church. And then I was thinking, well, how do I want to end the summer? And I knew that there are books in the New Testament that most people have just no idea what they're there for. And you don't hear them quoted often, you don't hear them looked at, and they're there, and they're all really short, and I call them the summer postcards. We've done one already. We were in a summer postcard, and we looked at Philemon, which had so much to state about issues that relate to our world today, issues of justice and how the gospel and how when we're in a right relationship with God, it changes how we relate to one another, not just within a church building, but within society, and how society should be shaped by the choices and the things that people make and how they relate to one another. And here in this short, tiny book, there it was, and the things that Paul was challenging individuals to do, Philemon, and with this individual named Onesimus, and who was coming back, and Paul sending him back. It's such a radical thing. We go now to actually another one of these summer postcards. I don't know if they're written in the summer, but I know they're all incredibly short books. And in this one, it's going to kind of have a brain dead moment that John's going to point out. A brain dead moment. Let me help you with brain dead moments. What I think, every once in a while you hear something and you go, man, that was just like a major brain dead moment. Sometimes with really catastrophic, really bad results. And not too long ago, I was reading about a couple of these brain dead moments. There was an individual in 1999 in Utah. They were doing a lot of cliff jumping and gliding and doing all that. And they were landing in pretty rocky, broken ground. And the one guy said, that's really rough on my body. I'm really thinking I'm going to shoot for the river. Because water's going to be softer. I can swim. I know how to swim. That'd be good. And so he takes off, leaps off this cliff. Parachute opens. Glides all the way down. He has total control and makes a conscious decision that what he's going to do is to land in a deeper section of that river. There was a major problem, a major brain dead moment with that. He's attached to a parachute. Rivers have a thing in it called current. And the parachute filled with the water of the current of the river, he couldn't get out of it, and the man lost his life because of a brain dead moment when he didn't think it through. Brain dead moment, major catastrophic event. I read about another one. This one occurred in Virginia much more recently. This was in the last couple of years, but in Virginia there was there's a bridge where a lot of bungee jumpers go, and they bungee jump off it. It's not a professional bungee jumping. It's not a tourist spot. It's just enthusiasts that go and do this. And this one individual had gotten into it. They were going to jump off a 75-foot bridge, and it was down, bounced back up, and he'd done this numerous times, but on that day, he didn't have anybody else check his measurements or things like that, but he was very confident because he'd done this numerous times. So he's going to jump off a 75-foot bridge, and he's got a bungee jump, so he laid his rope out and measured it to exactly 75 feet. He jumped off a bridge, and his bungee cord was 75 feet long. The problem was he weighed about 180 pounds, and the stretch at the end, well, he didn't live through it. A brain dead moment, which had catastrophic implications. Yeah, these moments when we just somehow miss something that should be so obvious, and we look at it, we shake our heads. How could they miss that? It's like a moment where the brain just stops working. I read about this one. This occurred in Egypt, and this was in the last couple of years. So this one I really have a hard time wrapping my head around. So there was a small, tiny well. It's quite deep. And in that small, tiny well, a guy's chicken fell. So One of his neighbors says, well, lower me down, I'll go get the chicken. He got stuck. So his other neighbor said, I need to go down and help him get out. He got stuck. Two other individuals entered the hole. They all got stuck. All four individuals died trying to rescue a chicken. At some point, something needed to say, this doesn't make sense. Now, when we studied 1 John, I talked to you about things like this. John was the least of the educated original 12 apostles. And he found himself in a section of Asia Minor where a major heresy was growing and it was developing. And John had a challenge to churches in general. How are you going to deal with this? And he broke it down into basic things. And you would like to think that after that first letter, when he addressed all that, they got it together. The whole purpose of this letter is they're still not getting it together. So they're struggling again, and he's astonished almost by the idea that, he says, wait a minute, I wrote you the first letter. How can this still be going on? He doesn't really say it that way, but that's kind of at the heart of the letter. He's writing back to at least one of those same churches, and he is going to address things that he already had to address that were huge when it came to the church's success and individuals' relationships with God. So we're going to look at the book of 2 John today. Now, last time I was here, I did this, and I'll challenge this again. I know that many of you now read a Bible on an electronic version. There are times I still love to pull mine out. Nigel tried this. Works good, doesn't it, Nigel? If you take your paper Bible and you cut it in half, just like that, you will hit the books of what they're called the books of poetry. You'll hit something like Psalms or Proverbs, and right there. It happens right in the middle. If you take the back half and you cut it in half again as close as you can, you will always hit the Gospels. That's how you find the Gospels really quick. Now, if you take that back half and you cut it again, you will always hit the epistles, and you will hit the epistles of Paul, which are listed from longest to shortest. And if in your mind you can think Romans, that's a bigger book than the Galatians, then you know which way to go when you get to those. When you come to the general epistles, those are the ones not written by Paul, by all the other names. They follow Paul's epistles, and so you got to cut it in half again. And if you cut it in half again, you will hit some of the general epistles named after like 1 Peter or 1 John or 2 John or any of those, and you can find them in there. That's just one of the ways to do it. So I just encourage people sometimes to just, pick it up and give it a try. Learn to do it. I've already found 2 John, and it's there. Nigel's still looking. He's practicing this. We appreciate that. We're going to go into 2 John this morning. Whether you choose to follow along on the screen, it's going to be on the screen, or you follow along on your phone or a tablet, or you use a paper Bible, whichever it is, I often challenge you to look at it because highlighting, underlining things are important. There's a couple of really key things in this book, 2 John. I want to talk to you about some general things about this book first. 2 John is the shortest book in the entire Bible. This carries the same weight. It's as significant. This is a book in the Bible. A book in the Bible. A book in the Bible that has only one chapter. Better than that, it's a book in the Bible that doesn't have very many verses. Anybody looked at it? How many verses in that, Nigel?
14, is that?
No, it's not 14. 13 verses. 13 verses. So when I say this is a postcard, it's a postcard. It's just 13 verses that he's writing here. And the early church, as it begins to organize, considered what John was writing in this little tiny postcard so important for the future of the church in general, they included it, and it becomes a part of the canon of Scripture. Wow. 13 verses. So if they thought it was that important, that key, it's probably significant for us to take a look at it. It has just those 13 verses. Now, everything about this kind of hinges on something that he's going to say in verse 4. And if you were looking at this and you had an ability to underline it, you wanted to star something, or on your electronic, you want to highlight it, verse 4 is probably the key verse, and it's going to unfold, and you'll see things on it. But this is what he's shocked about. He spent a great 5 chapters challenging the churches in general that were struggling with the fact, John, you're getting old. What are you going to do when you die? And he's telling them, this is what you're going to do. I've taught you the command from the beginning. Follow the command that I've taught you from the beginning. Do this. Watch out for this. Make sure you know what truth is and how to understand truth. It's kind of the simple things that he writes. So he's writing this letter because if you look in verse 4, he's kind of, surprised that maybe he's grateful that at least some are walking in the truth, but the problem of people walking away from the truth was still occurring. And it kind of hinges what's going to take place, what's going to unfold in this short book. So, why read it today? I've already hinted at some things, but I want to give you some ideas and some things that are significant. Well, John's going to do something in this where he's going to model what really good leadership looks like, and it still applies today. He's going to model something, and he's just going to do it in such a way where it's like, wow, yeah, that makes sense. And if you read a good book on leadership, what he does, people, they don't write about it and quote it, but the things that they write about are the same things that he did. John had it figured out. He had some very good leadership skills that were still very vital today. There's some other things about this. John's going to warn us again of this ever-present danger that faces, believers today. We want to, in our society today, there is an idea that, I can pick and choose what I like. My relationship with God is like a buffet. I go to the buffet. Ooh, crab legs, like that. That's good. Okay, go to a buffet. Ooh, fried chicken. Ooh, I like that. That's going on the plate. Ooh, liver and onions. Well, we're going to pass that by. We're going on. And we carry this idea that there's this concept that truth is something I get to pick and choose what I want. Not only that, we think truth is something that is open to, new ideas and new definitions, and that truth changes and things like this. And especially concerning who Jesus is and what he's like and what he came to do, that's a closed case study. It's not supposed to be reinterpreted all the time. And what this is like. Not too long ago on The View, the actor that plays Jesus in the television show The Chosen was on, and they asked him a question about, they were really glad because it seemed like in how he was treating people that he was very in tune with much more of an LGBTQ cultural environment. And he responded with, no, Jesus is just simply doing what Jesus did. He is loving people and leading them into a right relationship with God. Amen. What a great answer. It wasn't about Jesus coming to do a social issue. It wasn't Jesus about coming just to do a justice issue. Jesus was coming to demonstrate what a right relationship with God would look like and how to get one, and that would be only through him. So their answer was great, but we live in a society that want to redefine who Jesus is and what he's done. He's going to address that today. John's going to champion a very clear picture of the evidence. In 13 verses, he's going to champion, this is how you know what a transformed person looks like. You want to know what a person who's really in a relationship with God looks like? John's going to tell us. He's going to do it in just a book that's only got 13 verses. It's going to be there. So why read it today? Well, there's some good things in there. We should expect to see some leadership things. We should expect to see some things that are going to be kind of warnings about an ever-present danger or wandering from the truth. We should expect to see a really clear picture of what it looks like to be in a transformed relationship with a forgiver. That's going to be a part of it. So what's the big idea in this book? We're going to the book in a second. It was all kind of like a long introduction. So what's the big idea? Well, the leadership team in one church is challenged to face a difficult decision, difficult situation. This is one of the churches that John birthed. It's one of the churches that came into being under his ministry. They're facing a major crisis. And he says, wait till I get there, I'll fix everything. No, he says, fix this. Fix this. He empowers a leadership team. He empowers the people leading one small church with the idea, fix this, teach this, make sure that this gets addressed. He doesn't come in and doesn't micromanage it. Instead, he goes ahead and just challenges them to fix that situation. Now, he uses some really interesting language. If you've opened your Bible or if you found it electronically, he makes an interesting statement. He starts it, he says, this is who it's to. He says, to the chosen lady. That's who he says it to. It's the chosen lady, to the lady chosen by God and her children. What's he talking about here? Who's he talking about here? And, people kind of debate this. It might be that he is just writing the book to one particular Christian woman and her family, but that doesn't make a lot of sense to me when you read the book. But it could be that. It could also be that it is a particular woman in a church meeting in her home. I think it is most likely that. It is to the leadership team of this church that's given birth in the place that they meet, because at this point, buildings don't exist for churches. They're meeting in her home, and he's challenging them to fix it. It could mean, and I disagree with this, it's a particular church and those it has influenced. So in other words, it's one church and the children are all the other churches that she's birthed. I don't think it's that. I think it's just, this is an issue that you've got to face here. Leadership team, rise up, fix this. So he's writing, I think, to the chosen woman, and she's the woman who is hosting and leading the church that's meeting in her home. Her children, the people that are coming, they're a part of her congregation, that are growing, that are outreaching, that are doing that. That's who it's written to. Now, in it, there is this, once again, and John addressed this in his first epistle, the one that's long. That last 5th chapter, I said this is a really challenging chapter. He gets into this. Again, he's going to address a heresy called Docetism. And he's going to challenge them with the idea that you don't just need to address this, you don't just need to acknowledge this, you really got to take a tough stand on this. And let me try to explain. I think I came across this picture, and I think it really helps understand what the heresy was. So here's what, in that section of Asia Minor, they began to teach. Jesus didn't really come in the flesh. Whatever it was that died on the cross wasn't really there. It just seemed to be there. Because anything that's of the flesh is naturally evil. So if Jesus is the Son of God, he couldn't be in the flesh because this stuff is naturally evil. So Jesus didn't really die on the cross. It just seemed like something was there, and it did. And Docetism comes from the Greek word, docet, which just simply means, it's a verb, and it means to seem. That in other words, everything about the crucifixion and the resurrection of Jesus Christ did not happen bodily. It just seemed that way. It was not a figment of your imagination. It was more like a phantom experience. And that's what they believed it was. So that's kind of at the heart of the heresy. And even though he wrote about it and told all the churches, you got to beware of this church in this woman's home has gotten suckered into it. And so he's going to address it as he goes into it. Okay, so let's get into John's book. 2 John. The first big challenge that he's going to make in there is he's going to hang it all on. And if you read 1 John, these two themes are there, right in 1 John. It's all about truth and love. Again, he's going to make this all about truth and love. Remember, this is only 13 verses. 13 verses, and he's going to hammer some things home. He says this, to the lady chosen by God and to her children, whom I love in the truth, and not I only, but also all who know the truth because of the truth which lies in us and will be with us forever. To those people, in his introduction, he's hammering home the idea. The truth issue is huge. You've got to know truth. Grace, mercy, peace from God the Father and from Jesus Christ, the Father's Son. If we are truly in that relationship, he'll be with us in truth and love. 4 times in his introduction, he hammers home the idea. You got to know truth. Truth is the key issue that's going to come on here. Truth's the issue because there were people in their midst who were saying, yeah, Jesus wasn't really real. And today we have people that say this, well, Jesus, and I heard someone arguing this not long ago, and they were saying, maybe Jesus existed, but if he existed, he was just a man and everything else about him was blown up. He taught really great things. Maybe, if he really existed. This guy was basically arguing that he probably didn't really exist. It's probably just a bunch of teaching of a whole bunch of guys. They lumped it together and they created it that way. And I thought, wow. Wow. So he begins and he's basically challenged us. He says, look, this relationship that you have with God, a couple of key things are always going to be about it. And one is the need to know and understand truth, which is the reason we challenge people. Look, don't just take my word for it. You ought to be reading your Bible. You ought to be diving into it. You ought to start going to it. You ought to look in it. Yes, there'll be things you won't understand, but that's when you go and ask Nigel. Nigel, what does this mean? You go and ask Wes. Wes, what does this mean? You go and ask Bob. You go ask somebody. What does this mean? You go out. Why? Because truth is vital and it's important. And it was one of the things that was huge to know and understand. If we don't know truth, then we can believe every lie that comes along. 4th verse. He has given me great joy to find some of your children walking in truth, just as the Father has commanded us. Now, what's really unsettling about verse 4? The word some. He didn't say it this way. I'm really encouraged to know that most of your children are walking in truth. He said this. I'm encouraged to know that, well, they're not all walking in a lie, that some of them are holding on to truth. I'm encouraged with that. But that's going to be really unsettling as a leader. It's going to be greatly unsettling, and this is the issue that he wants to address, that just a few are still holding on. That's his introduction to the 13 verses that he's writing. That's the introduction to the letter. Goes on. Now he's going to go into his big point. He's going to make a big point about the idea of obedience. About obedience. And he's going to go back, and this is going to sound like his earlier letter. He says this, now, dear lady, I am writing you a new command, but it's one that we've had from the beginning. He does this often in 1 John. He talks about this as, well, this is the new command. It's the new command that God gave us. It goes all the way back to what Jesus said when Jesus was challenged by the Pharisees, and they said, oh, which of the Old Testament laws is more important than the others? And Jesus summed up the entire Old Testament law in 2 statements. He says, you know the law? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, your mind, soul, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. And then he goes on and he adds to it. The entire law is summed up in those 2 things. Jesus said that. So John, who was there, eyewitness to it, John, who knew that, he said, in every church that he was in, look, we got to get this right. We got to love the Lord our God with all our heart, mind, soul, and strength. That's the command. We got to do this. We got to love one another. So look what appears here. And now, dear lady, I'm writing to you a new command. I am not writing to you a new command, but one that we have had from the beginning. I ask that we love one another. And this is love, that we walk in obedience to his commands, as you've heard from the beginning. His command is that you walk in love. So John would sum up, when I graduated from high school in New York State, and we were back in New York for Cheryl's 50th reunion. I know it's amazing that a man as young as I am has a wife that had her 50th reunion this last weekend. I know. So when we graduated, we passed these regent exams. It wasn't just the finals that you had to take at the school. They were these state exams they had to study for, and you spent like half a year prepping for the regents that you were going to take and all these different courses, and you had to pass the regents to get to it. And if you passed the regents, then the state said, yes, you are certified in whether it was English or science or Spanish or whatever it was you were taking. If you got a regent, then the state was saying, yes, you passed the test, you're verified in this, you're at a level above other people, you're the real thing. This is what John says, is the Regent's test. You see someone who claims to be in a relationship with Jesus Christ and they are not moved by love. Question their relationship. It is impossible to be in love with a God who has saved us, who has forgiven us, who has invited us into a relationship with him, and to have that person not be radically changed by that. And how it looks to other people is it comes out in the form of love. That's not romantic love. It's love that motivates you to do things. It's love that motivates you to sacrifice on others' behalf. It's love that makes you move in other people's lives in a way that brings God closer. John says that's the defining thing. That's the test. You know how easy it is? Whether you're getting it right, are you walking in fulfillment of his commands? His commands are love him and love each other. So that's really profound. And I love that because it makes it really easy. It's not about my race or my social standing or my culture or my background or my education or how much I make in a paycheck. Those aren't the things that make me verifiable for God. It's not the things that how much I give, how much I serve, how much I teach. It is whether or not the prime example of love is manifested and seen in my life. So what is love like? Love cares. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love it, and well, Paul wrote about it. He writes part of a chapter on what it looks like, and it goes into it. We have this concept, and John comes back to it, and he says, this is it. This is what Jesus commanded. This was his command. And he repeatedly used, in all of his letters, he more than anybody else, he uses that word. He commanded this. Now, some of you have given a command to your children that maybe they ignored. And that probably fired you up a little bit. Because if it was a command, you knew that they knew to take it serious. The single biggest issue for us is, do we love God? And is it evident in how we love one another? It boils down to that. It's impossible to be in a transformed life with God if that doesn't become evident. So that's where he's at. He's going to challenge them. We're now just a few verses in. He's halfway through his postcard, and he's challenging them, make sure that you are walking in love. Now, he's going to do a brain check with them. Brain dead moment. Brain dead moment. Don't fall prey to this. Don't check your brain at the door. Make sure that you're thinking when it comes to this. Don't get this wrong. Don't get this wrong. He says this. I say this. This is why he's writing it. I say this because many deceivers who do not acknowledge that Jesus Christ, look what he's writing, is coming in the flesh, have gone out into the world. These people are all over that are talking about this mystical Jesus who wasn't really there, didn't really die on the cross, wasn't really raised from the dead. I'm writing to you because there are people out there that are writing all sorts of things that about him that aren't true. I'm writing this. I'm concerned about this. And it says this, any such person is the deceiver, the Antichrist, leading people away from God rather than towards Christ. Watch out that you do not lose what you have worked for, but that you may be rewarded fully. Anyone who runs ahead and does not continue in the teaching of Christ does not have God. Truth's a key issue. Went too far. Goes on. He's going to end his letter. He's going to make this thing. He makes the statement to them. Look, it's still out there. Your people are being deceived. It's all about the command, and it's all about not losing fact of who the truth of Jesus is. Anybody remember on Pentecost what Peter did on the day of Pentecost? Peter on the day of Pentecost stands up, and people are saying, they're hearing people talk in all sorts of different languages. They're hearing it all in their own language. They're hearing this, they're amazed. Some are thinking these guys are drunk in the middle of the day. What's going on? Day of Pentecost. Peter gets up. Peter gets up. Peter who's messed up so many different ways in the past. Peter gets up and says, hey, this is the Spirit of the living God that's going on there. And then he goes into the first message of the church. And what was the first message of the church about? The truth of who Jesus was. Period. The very first message was about the reality of who Jesus was and what he's just done. That's the message. The thing that we hold dear, the pearl of great price, the truth that is so amazing, is this: Jesus came into the world to close the gap between God and a broken, lost humanity by paying for their sins with his own physical death. The perfect dying for the imperfect. The sinless dying for the sinner. That we, who could never earn a relationship with God, get invited back to a relationship with God. It all hinges on that. And John is worried for this one church. So he writes to the leader in the church. And he says, hammer this thing home. If they get this wrong, they'll be lost. Huge issue. Huge issue. He's going to close his letter. And he does some things in the closing remarks that are huge and significant, and also are leadership lessons. He says this: I have much to write to you, but I don't want to use paper and ink. Instead, I hope to visit you and talk with you face to face so that your joy may be complete. Then he says this: the children of your sister, who is chosen by God, send your greetings. Now, when I was young in the Lord, and I was starting to read through the Bible on a fairly regular basis, and I didn't know any of it, and I'd read through it, and I had to get some of these short epistles. I have to confess this. My first reading of 2 John went like this. My first reading of 3 John went, I just kind of flipped over it because it didn't seem to make a lot of sense to me. And these postcards seem to not make a lot of sense to us because we don't know certain things. But I go back to it now and I'm amazed. Here we're a church that says we gauge our effectiveness by our ability to connect with one another. If we're not making connections, or if we're not supporting one another, if it's not happening, we don't get it. So he does this. He says, I got a bunch more stuff I'd like to tell you, but I'm going to do what? I'd rather connect with you. I'd rather do this thing face to face. I'd rather, let's have coffee together. And then, I went to, Starbucks on the corner of Tel Aviv, and, we're worked out. But I'd like to do it. I want to do this face to face. And then he goes on, look what he says. So that not their joy, but whose joy? Our joy may be complete. So Quentin's one of the individuals Rich is one of the individuals who's been in one of those meetings. And there's those meetings. I leave those meetings with you on Wednesday, and I'm pumped. How do you leave them? I feel good. Yeah, there's this. He's come in, and Quentin's going through a time period right now where the whole job situation, his challenge is going on. He's going through all sorts of struggles. We're there on Wednesday. We listen to that a little bit, but then we zone in on what we're like. Man, I leave there. Now I may have walked in, and I'm down here, and I walk up, and I'm up here, and the joy comes out of it. The joy comes out of it. Why? Because the connecting is powerful. And John kind of understood that. He understood that. He understood that something unique would happen when believers connected with one another. When they weren't just kind of like occasionally, hey, Nigel, how you doing? But there was actually a deeper connection that was going on. And he just really recognized that. And then he goes on and he extends even a greater connectedness. He extends this connectedness and he says, the children of your sister. Now, if this is the woman who's leading a church in her home, she may have led, or maybe the sister did it, but she's got somebody else in the family who looks like he's doing the same thing. So somebody else, because that's how it happened. That's how it happened. It would be like, Jennifer's pulled a group together in her home because, there are people that couldn't meet anywhere else, so she pulled a group together. Or, Donna pulls a group together because they're going on, and that's how the church grew at that time. It was people pulling other people together, and they were making those connections, and they were walking them forward. So once again, here he says, he just sees that greater connection, and he recognizes it, and he greets her with that, and he closes his letter. In 13 verses, he hammers home some very deep and profound truths. So what are the lessons for us? Well, you've heard a few already, but I want to stress a couple others. One, if if you're a leader, tomorrow night, our governing board will meet. Pretty big meeting tomorrow night, right, Nigel? The big one. Anybody's on the board, Bob? Big meeting tomorrow night, right? Big one. It's a big one. I mean, they know it's coming. This is the third of a series of meetings that are huge meetings that we're having. Huge meetings. Those are going on. And leadership lessons for the church in this are things like this. As we move forward, it's not about micromanaging. See, because I'm not smart enough to figure all this out. I'm not young enough to do all the work that's got to take place. And, it's not going to be about one person micromanaging everything. And it wasn't. But leadership was still going to have to respond. John doesn't go there. Instead, he entrusts others to fix it. He entrusts the woman who was leading this church. Fix this. Fix this. He entrusted the other leaders. He championed core truths. In his experience, if John had core values, he only really had two. If you read 1 John, 2 John, 3 John, he's only got two core values. Truth and love. That's it. We're going to make it all about truth and we're going to make it all about love. Get it right. Get it right. That's what it is. But he champions that. When he writes it, he does it in a profound way. It comes into his letters all the time. There were the things that he kept hammering home. And as a church, we got to keep doing that. We say there are 6 core values. I should spit them out to you so you know, because just remind you what they are. First one, it's all about a right relationship with Christ. 2, we will communicate the word of God with power and relevancy to everyday life. If it doesn't make sense when you go home, we missed the boat. We blew it. 3, we will make prayer happen. We won't just talk about prayer. 4, we will create an atmosphere of love where we don't care if you come in and your arms are blue with tattoos, and you got an earring here, or your skin's a different color, or someone else, or what your age is, it won't matter to us. We will create an atmosphere of love that anyone who wants to know what he is like can find a home. We will create that atmosphere of love. 5, we will believe that the Holy Spirit wants to use us and move. We will have a positive expectation of what God wants to do. We will believe that. Number 6, relationships. We can't do this without relationships. Our 6 core values. I told the board, by the way, it's a true statement. I've told the board you can fire me if somebody calls me out. Hey, what are the 6 core values again? If I can't name them. If I can't name them. Give me the boot. But here's what I'd love to have today. I'd love to have the day when I can look it down and down. What are the 6? I do this sometimes to the board. I'll go, what are the 6? And they get a corporate time. They work on, I kind of, what do you think? Mary be there. I got these written down somewhere. we pull them out, but they come up with them. Why? Because it's one of the leadership things. If you want people to be and become something, we have to hold up the same thing over and over. It's who we are. Those are the core values of New Hope Church. John demonstrates that. He champions his core truths. He stays connected. I find it amazing when he says that. I mean, first of all, he's old. He's older than he was than your old 1 John. He's not been banished to the Isle of Patmos yet. So he's still traveling around. He's doing stuff that doesn't make sense. People who say, well, you're an old man. I mean, take it easy now, John. And he said, no, I still want to do this. I want to go visit that church again. I want to go sit with them. I want to have the joy that comes from being with them again. I want that. And he's staying connected. I love that. And then he just keeps encouraging community. His last statement doesn't have to be there. Verse 13 bears no weight on what he wrote unless he valued community. By the way, your sister and her children in that church, they send their greetings. It reveals one of his values there. But everything that he was writing, it bears no other significance than the rest of the letter. But he shows that, this community thing, this connection thing that we talk about is huge and powerful. So I always like to end it this way. I think we have to have these moments where we go, what am I supposed to be doing now? I think we need to ask ourselves this question. Who am I connecting with? I know it's still coming to the end of, snowbird season. We got people that are away. We got some people that are, outside of snowbird season. They're here all the time. We go through that. But here's what I'm wrestling with. God, who are you calling me to connect with this next week? Because I think if John saw it important at this point, he's probably in his 80s, that he had to keep doing it, then I need to keep doing it. So Larry, who's God calling you to connect with this week? Dave Carlson, who's God calling you to connect with this week? Because the connections are important. And that's a great question that I have for you. Because if we're a church, honest, I can't do the connections for everybody. But I connect with some. And if you connect with some, we become stronger, we become better, all those things. That's why we do small groups. That's why we do those. Who is God calling you to connect with? Be faithful in that calling. I ask worship team to come back up. We'll close the service and pray. I'm going to invite you. I don't know if you got your phone with you and you can put an alarm or a reminder or put it on your calendar. Just put board meeting, and if you happen to remember it tomorrow night, I'd ask you to pray over the board. Pray over the board. Because let me tell you the heart of it. About a month ago, we said, we're tired of this. How do we move forward? And we threw a ton of stuff on the table. And what I hope happens tomorrow night, we come out and we have a detailed plan that we'll be sharing with you as we move forward. And again, I think you're going to be surprised by some of the things that God's challenging us with. So, 6 o'clock tomorrow night, the board, 6:30 tomorrow night. Mary, 6:30, right? Thank you. She has the answer, as usual. Pray for us as a board. Pray for yourself.